Good morning. Forgive me, I am not much of a public speaker. I am a fisherman, and I live a very simple life on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And so you're probably thinking now, why are you speaking then? And I fully understand that I'm not an apostle. My name is never mentioned in the Bible, but I do like to think that I have a very, very special boat. You know, what you call the Gospel of Mark paints the picture very, very clearly. You can read it for yourself, but I was there. And if you have time, I would love to share with you my version of what happened those days. I hear they're very popular stories today. And I got to see and I got to experience firsthand the power of God revealed in Jesus of Nazareth. And so this is my side of the story. I remember the day, so vividly, so clearly, as if it was just yesterday. I was tired from a terrible day's fishing. The fishing industry was in peril, and I was on the shore in the Sea of Galilee repairing my boat after a long, exhausting day catching very few fish. I was crouched down, fixing my nets. I just wanted to go home, get rest, and I just wanted to forget that day. But off in the distance, I noticed a man who was walking, I think, towards me, and he was clearly a rabbi. I could tell by his turban and the clothes that he wore. He had a group of people following him, but I didn't really mind. I just wanted to get this net repaired, put it away, and go home. Well, suddenly that man approached me. And he asked if he could and his friends borrow my boat and if I could take them across to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, you should know, usually I would have said, no, leave me alone, that's ridiculous. I would have said no, because there were a lot of reasons. One, I was exhausted, I was tired. I didn't know who this guy was, I didn't care. I just wanted to get home. Secondly, it was storm season and night was approaching. What you may not know is that the Sea of Galilee is about 18 miles long, about 10 or 8 miles wide, but it sits 700 feet below the sea level. And so what would happen is cool winds would rush down the steep cliffs surrounding the Sea of Galilee, and they would stir up terrible storms on the surface of the warm water. And this was storm season. And it was night. I did not want to go to the other side of the sea. But there was something about this man. He not only looked at me, have you ever had that experience where he looked through me and he could see me? And I just had this sense, and I didn't really understand it at the time, but I just had this sense that we would be okay. So I reluctantly agreed. He and his friends, he called them disciples, got into my boat, and there was a lot of other people following him. So I got some of my nearby friends to get their boats ready, and actually a caravan of us pushed off into the night to get to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And as I began to row, I listened to these friends, these disciples, share stories of their time with this man, and I learned that this was Jesus of Nazareth, the famous rabbi. Now, you should know we had this saying where I grew up, does anything good come from Nazareth? And here he was in my boat. And I've heard the stories, and they were sharing the stories. He could heal people with just his touch. He touched an unclean leper once. He could raise people from the dead. And so they were sharing these stories, and I was blown away. Could this really be true? And then they began to share these stories of his lessons. He was apparently a powerful teacher. He taught as someone with authority, as someone with power, much unlike the scribes and the Pharisees that I grew up listening to in the synagogue in my town. They tried to even get me to understand, what did they call them? These parables. I had no idea what they were talking about. I was so confused. I don't know anything about farming or seeds. I did think the one parable about the 10 virgins was very interesting, though, to me. But I didn't mind. I just rode into the night listening, and I was really surprised because as they shared about this Jesus, he was asleep in my boat on the cushion that my grandmother had made for me many years ago in the stern, just completely exhausted. I mean, how could this be the Son of God if he was sleeping? But I didn't mind it. I just rowed and listened. Meanwhile, the other disciples fell asleep too, and it was just me and the boat. And just as I feared, the wind picked up. The rains came down. The waves started to get larger and larger. And just like I warned them, a fierce storm descended on us, and we were right in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. So I woke up the disciples and told them to start bailing out the water. And I tried as hard as I could to row, but the waves got bigger, and they threatened to break up my fragile wood boat. I've had it for many years. We bailed out water. And let me remind you, these men started panicking, and several of them, if my memory serves me correctly, were fishermen. So I told them to calm down. We could get through this. And I rowed, and my worst fears were coming true. We weren't going to get to the other side. Like the waves started to make my boat sink. And just at the last moment, who was it? Was it Peter? Was it James? I can't remember, but one of them woke up Jesus, who was still sleeping. And they shook him violently, and they said these words, and I was so surprised. They said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" What? Don't you care? I hope he cares if we drown. I mean, I cared if we drown, but what in the world what could this rabbi do about this storm? Yeah, Jesus, get up and start to bail with us. Maybe you'll help. I don't know. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? What a weird question. And just as my boat was taking on too much water, just as I could not push those oars one more foot, Jesus stood up calmly, and he looked out to the winds and to the waves, and he said these words. It was almost as if he was talking to a disobedient little child at the dinner table. He said, "Quiet, be still." And instantly, the wind stopped. The waves died down. It was quiet. It was calm. I was absolutely terrified. I had never experienced anything like that before. It left me and the disciples wondering, who is this that even the winds and the waves obey him? But I just kept rowing. And then Jesus turned to the disciples and he asked them a very penetrating question. He said, "Why are you so afraid? Where is your faith?" And I don't want to talk for the disciples. I'll tell you how I felt. Why was I so afraid? We were going to die. And what in the world does faith have to do with anything? You know what? I was just like, I got to get to this. I get these guys out of my boat. That's what I thought at the moment. So I just rowed. But then Jesus looked to me and he said, "No, I want you to steer over to the area of the Gerasenes." I said, "Jesus, no. You don't want to go to the area of the Gerasenes. We are good Jews. That is predominantly a Gentile region. You know this, Jesus. We don't want to be around Jews. And oh, by the way, Jesus, there's these stories of a crazed demoniac roaming those hills. I do not want to go there. I've never been there. No. Let's just keep heading west where I was heading." And Jesus said, "No." And he insisted in this loving and caring way. And at this point I said, fine. So I pointed my boat to the area of the Gerasenes and I continued to row. But the disciples, they asked me, they said, "Well, what stories have you heard about this man?" And I said, "Well, I've heard all kinds of stories. I don't know if they're true or not." But I said, apparently there is this demoniac, this man, we don't even know his name, who roams the hills. He actually lives in the cemetery. And we Jews are terrified of cemeteries for two reasons. One, they are considered ceremonially unclean. We don't want to be around Gentiles. We don't want to be around dead bodies. We definitely don't want to be around the tombs. But this man had also what we called an impure spirit or an unclean spirit. You would call him today someone possessed by a demon. And so again, that was symbolic of someone being unclean. And they said, "Well, tell us more." I said, "Well, I don't know if this is true, but I hear that he not only lives in the tombs, But he cries out night and day. He beats himself with sharp stones and cuts himself. He runs around naked, screaming and shouting. The town was so afraid of this man that they tried to bind him and shackle him to the ground, but he would break the chains. He would break the shackles. He clearly had superhuman strength. And as I shared this story, those disciples, their eyes got as big as matzo balls. They were so paranoid. And I said, yeah, guys, that's where we're going. And so as I got closer, night was slowly lifting, and then I heard it. I heard the screams. I heard the cries. I said, Jesus, I'm not going any further. You can swim to the shore. But Jesus insisted. And so we got to the shore. Jesus jumped out of the boat and I saw him. This man came out of nowhere, running full speed to Jesus, screaming, shouting, completely naked. His body was cut and bruised. It was terrifying. And I just froze in panic. I mean, we all froze. I maybe should have did something. I thought this man was going to attack Jesus, but I didn't know what to do. And this man came and ran and he threw himself down at Jesus' feet on his knees. And at the top of his voice shouted this, and I'll never forget how it sounded. What do you want to do with me, Son of the Most High God? Do not torment me. I didn't know what was going on. Wait, was this the man speaking? Was this the demon speaking? What? And if it was the man or the demon, are they saying that Jesus of Nazareth is the Son of God? I didn't know what was going on at the time, but I was frozen in panic and terror. And then Jesus rebuked the demon, and the demon came out of him. And then it dawned on me. The same man that told the wind and the waves to calm down with the power of his word is now telling this evil force to come out, and both listened. And right then and there, in that moment, I thought, this truly is the Son of the Most High God. I'd never seen that before. But then, friends, Jesus did something I don't recommend. I didn't even know this was even possible. I'd never seen anyone do this. He asked the demon his name. Yeah, you heard me right. He asked the demon his name, and then the demon answered and said, "We are legion, for we are many." And I was like, wait. So maybe you don't know this, but legion is actually a military term. It is a reference for a Roman army of about 6,000 soldiers. So apparently, if I understood the whole events correctly, this man was not just possessed by one demon, but by a whole army of demons. Like, it's no wonder the town could not bind and shackle him and subdue him, because this man was not just any man. He was clearly controlled by a whole army of demons. I couldn't believe it. And then the demons, this legion, said that they, whatever it is, wanted to be sent into these nearby pigs. Pigs! Like, I'm a good Jewish man. I had never eaten pork in my life. I was so panicked, so afraid. I didn't even hear that there were 2,000 pigs grazing on the nearby hillside. I couldn't believe. So here we are in a Gentile area talking to a demon, and there are pigs. This is a terrible day for me. And then Jesus allowed these demons to enter a herd of 2,000 pigs. Now, have you ever heard a pig squeal? I have. It's a terrible sound, awful. Now, I just want you to imagine the sound of 2,000 pigs squealing, screaming, biting each other, hitting each other, running, tumbling over each other, and then in this state of madness, running and jumping off of a cliff into the sea where they all drowned. Yes, 2,000 pigs. I was terrified. I finally jumped out of the boat and I walked far away from this madness as I could. I said, this is just too much for me. I did not sign up for this. And at the time, and maybe you're wondering, you're thinking, well, why in the world would Jesus allow demons to enter pigs? You might like pigs. I hate pigs. But either way, I sat back and I saw this man now dressed and sitting in his right mind, and it dawned on me. Jesus wanted to give this man and all of us, myself included, a visible, graphic, poignant image of the power and immensity of evil that kept this man bound and in shackles. See, evil always wants to chain us. Evil wants to isolate us. Evil always seeks to destroy and devour us, but Jesus came to set us free, to make us whole, so that we could experience the kingdom of God for ourselves and experience what we call in my culture shalom, wholeness. And so there this man was sitting and in his right mind experiencing Jesus and the kingdom of God for himself. His shame was now covered with clothes. He was now talking to Jesus, hearing from Jesus, hugging Jesus. It was a beautiful, beautiful picture. Well, it would be an understatement to say that the word got out. It was a small town, and I expected all the townspeople to come out and want to see this for themselves. I expect them to want to experience Jesus' teaching and hear from the master teacher. I expected them to come out to bringing them their diseased and their sick and their lame. I expect them to come out and embrace Jesus. But that's not at all what happened. In fact, when the townspeople came out and they saw the pigs and they saw this man sitting and in his right mind, they were afraid. They were afraid. You know, I've realized that fear can lead us to do some really terrible things and make us really make poor decisions. And in their fear, they asked Jesus to leave. To leave. They asked who I now considered the Son of God, the Messiah that we had been longing and waiting for, the King of Kings, a Savior, to leave immediately. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And you may be wondering, and I don't blame you for one, like, why would they ask him to leave? I mean, this was Jesus after all, right? Well, you need to understand something that this is just my opinion. They asked Jesus to leave because Jesus was testing them in the most sensitive area of their bodies, their money bag, or you would call it your purse or your, what do you call it, wallet? Yeah. Jesus loves to test us in those areas of our heart that are very, very sensitive. Because for those people, those 2,000 pigs brought a lot of resources and income for the entire village. And that's why they tried to bind and shackle this man. He was scaring off the herdspeople. He was scaring off the town. This man was bad for business, and now Jesus came and killed all of their pigs. Terrible, they thought. And what that told me in that moment, that for these townspeople, pigs were more important than people. Pigs were more important than desperate, lonely, hurting, and broken people. They wanted to keep that man on the fringes of society, locked away and out of the way. But Jesus set him free, and they did not like it because pigs were more important than people. It was sad. There were two very different responses that morning. This desperate, hopeless demoniac who we don't even know his name, how sad is that, came running at Jesus, threw himself down at his feet and said, "Please help me." And yet an entire town came out and saw the pigs and saw this man and said, Jesus, you need to leave, and you need to leave immediately. But that's how people are, aren't they? Hey, what did it matter to me? I had a few repairs I needed to do on my boat. I got things squared away. And the disciples and Jesus got back in my boat. And just before I was going to push off, the demoniac came to Jesus and said, please, let me go with you. I want to be with you. I want to learn from you. I want to be one of your disciples too. And I didn't care. We actually had room for him in my boat or maybe on one of the other boats. There were hundreds of people that followed Jesus. What's one more guy? This guy surely had a great story to tell. Bring him on. But Jesus said no. He told this man, he said, no, go home. Go to your people and tell them what the Lord has done for you and how he has showed mercy on you. And I thought, that's so amazing. Jesus gave this man an incredible mission to go into the Decapolis. The Decapolis is an area of about 10 towns, and one of them was his home. I can't remember exactly what town, but he sent this man with purpose and on mission to go into all the Decapolis and tell everyone what the Lord had done for him and how the Lord had shown him mercy. This man truly had a story to tell. And so he left. And I heard years later that man truly had a story to tell. Many heard and responded to what we call the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, because of that one man. So we pushed off, and this time it was smooth sailing back to the other side of the shore. I was like looking for rain and looking for wind. Thank the Lord that none of it happened. And the disciples and Jesus left. And they went on their way, and I sat there just overwhelmed. Because here's the thing, I did not come back to tell you the events because you can read those for yourself. But I came back to tell you what the Lord did for me and how the Lord showed mercy to me. See, what I failed to mention at the beginning was my marriage was in trouble. My kids hated being around me. I mean, I was hard to be around if I was honest. The fishing business was in absolute peril. We were desperate. I didn't know if we were going to make it financially. I didn't know what to do. I turned to everyone and everything. Yes, I wasn't controlled by a demon, but I was just as broken. I was just as desperate. Yes, I had grew up hearing about this Messiah would one day come, but I ignored it all because it was just religion to me. Do's and don'ts. I obeyed because I felt like I had to. And yet Jesus came to me. Jesus chose my boat. And Jesus allowed me to experience the power and glory of God. I saw a storm quieted by his words. I saw an uncontrollable demoniac healed in an instant. And there is no doubt in my mind that Jesus truly is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords and the Son of God. Now, let me just say a few things. And again, I'm no preacher, so bear with me. First is there's a lot of people hear this story and they like to sensationalize the demon possession and the demoniac and all. That is not the point of the story whatsoever. The true miracle took place in the life of this man who was sitting and in his right mind. He was set free because of the power of God revealed in Jesus. And secondly, I don't know any of you here. I don't know your stories. I don't know what's going on in your life, but I do know this, that we all struggle with inner demons, that we all struggle with things that keep us chained and locked down, that we are all struggle with areas of sin that make us desperate. Some of you are isolated away from community and a community of faith, just like that demoniac. Some of you, maybe your marriage is struggling just like mine was, or maybe your kids didn't want to be around you just like mine. I don't know where you're at. Here's all that I know. And I'm just a simple fisherman, but what I do know is this, that Jesus can set you free too. That you are never meant to live among the tombs. You are never meant to live chained down and shackled, because Jesus came to show you and reveal to you his incredible power, his incredible glory. And I remember the day, it was 2 years later, roughly, I heard that Jesus was crucified. I wasn't surprised, you guys. I mean, I knew the religious elite would not tolerate this man because of the things he said and he did. They loved their power. I also knew that Rome was very, very careful of anyone trying to create an uprising, and Jesus kind of had that effect with people. But then as I pored over the scriptures of my childhood, I realized that the scriptures foretold that the Messiah would come, that he would be pierced for our transgressions and bruised for our iniquities. But then I heard that 3 days later that he rose from the grave and he revealed himself to hundreds of people. I wish he revealed himself to me, but he didn't. But he revealed himself to hundreds of people. He truly has power over death. It was incredible, incredible. And I realized in that day that Jesus crossed a violent storm to save you too. And that storm was the cross, where he was pierced and bloodied and murdered for you. He paid the price that you and I could never pay. And he set us all free because of his death and resurrection. And then as I continued to read the scriptures, I realized that he is coming back again. And so as I fish, and as I row out into the middle of the Sea of Galilee and I cast out my nets, and especially when it's very, very calm, I remember all these events. And I think about who Jesus was and what he came to do and what he did for me. And I remember that he changed me. And yes, it took time for my marriage to heal, but God did that. And yes, it took time for my kids to like me again, but God did that. The greatest miracle in my life was that I stopped worrying about the fishing business, and I just trusted God with that. God did that. And as I cast my nets out and I look out on the sea, I still think, who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him? But now I know the answer to that question. Do you? Shalom, my brothers and sisters. Thank you for having me.